February 2000, and the British police force is still reeling from the crisis that engulfed it last year, when an independent inquiry branded the police institutionally racist. On the first anniversary of that report, we ask, has anything changed? Or is there still an underlying assumption in police investigations that black lives are cheaper than white? Back in October 1997, 20-year-old computer science student Ricky Reel went for a night out with 3 friends. They were attacked by 2 young white men, and the friends ran in different directions. When Ricky failed to return home later that night, his mother contacted the police.
My husband, my brother, and the witnesses who were attacked went to the police station and said, my friend, we were attacked, could you take a statement? We were racially attacked. Could you take a statement? The police didn't want to bother. The police didn't want to know. They didn't take a statement. And instead of saying to the family, we are sorry, we will do what we can, they started abusing us, saying Ricky's run away with a girlfriend or boyfriend.
The police refused to launch an immediate investigation, so Sukhdev's family and friends did the job themselves.
For example, going into late-night buses with Ricky's photograph, going into shops, clubs, we formed a human chain and looked for our son. How many white families do this kind of investigation, whereas we were left to look for our sons, for Ricky ourselves?
On the second day, they located crucial security camera footage of the night Ricky disappeared. The police, meanwhile, were pursuing other lines of inquiry.
Second or the third day, lots of police officers just barged into my house. No explanation given even up to now. They started searching my house. What were they searching for? That I've killed my son and hid him somewhere?
A week after Ricky was last seen, the news they feared came.
A police officer came in and said they found my son's body from the bottom of the river. I don't remember very much because at that time I passed out. When I went in, I found out that there were 2 police officers in my house, and they did not wait for my return. They just went into my house and told my 11-year-old son that they found his brother's body from the bottom of the river. And my 17-year-old daughter, who was with him, had an asthma attack right in front of the 2 police officers, who continued to laugh and joke about, I don't know what, they found it amusing. So how many families, how many white families have suffered that fate? No one, to my knowledge.
The police investigation concluded that Ricky's death was accidental. He'd fallen while trying to urinate into the river. But in November last year, an inquest was held, and the jury decided that no one could be sure how Ricky had died. They delivered an open verdict. The family felt they'd won a small victory, but that the police had still failed them.
Our family did not get this level of service which we had every right to expect. And my own conclusion is I didn't get that service because I'm black.
The Reel family are represented by human rights barrister Michael Mansfield QC, who's worked with many other black families over the last 10 years.
They're all saying the same thing. One, they're not taken seriously by the police force that's investigating, unfortunately in many cases, the death of a loved one. They feel isolated, they feel demeaned, they don't get answers to the questions they ask, and even when they do provide information, that information isn't acted upon.
Resentment towards the police had been building throughout Britain's ethnic minorities since the 1980s. The widely held view was that the police did not value black life as highly as white. And with almost a quarter of Londoners being non-white, the police were seen to be failing a large proportion of their citizens. It was in February last year that this resentment came to a very public showdown, after yet another bungled police investigation into yet another murder of a young black man. At 10:30 p.m. on April the 22nd, 1993, 18-year-old Stephen Lawrence waited with a friend for a bus in southeast London. A gang of 5 white men shouting racial abuse approached them. The 2 friends ran, but Stephen was caught and stabbed in the chest. He died on the roadside, surrounded by a crowd of police officers, none of whom administered even the most basic first aid. The police investigations into his death were so flawed that none of the killers have ever been brought to justice.
But I just couldn't sit back and allow the police, the justice system to say, well, I'm sorry, there's nothing else we can do. I wanted more.
So began her fight for justice. Together with her husband Neville, Doreen Lawrence fought a 6-year campaign, which resulted finally in the new Labour government ordering an independent inquiry into the bungled police investigation. The year-long inquiry uncovered a catalogue of errors: evidence lost, leads not followed, witnesses ignored, suspects not arrested. In February last year, the inquiry published the Macpherson report with its devastating conclusion. The police failings were not due solely to incompetence, but also to a deep-seated racism running throughout the British police force. Institutional racism.
It's not a difficult concept. All it's trying to convey is that this kind of racism is inbuilt into a system. It's systemic. In other words, it's a set of reactions that people have towards a situation in which they are discriminating against somebody because they are black.
London's police chief grudgingly accepted the findings of the report, admitting that they were institutionally racist and did need to change. But inside the police stations, opinion was divided.
When I joined, the Met was an openly racist organisation in which racist language was the norm in every aspect of the organisation.
I've not seen any officer in 12 years who has been out and out racist, because even in the last 5 minutes, particularly today, even in the last 5 minutes, because we're so politically correct now that you don't know what's happening, you don't know who to trust, you don't know who to speak to.
The Macpherson report made 70 recommendations for change and improvement. 1 year later, the new chief of London's Metropolitan Police, Sir John Stevens, defends their progress.
What I can tell you is this, that the Metropolitan Police is not the same, and nor should it be. It has changed and developed across the board. However, we are determined to go further and turn the Metropolitan Police into a truly anti-racist police service. But our work in building a multicultural police force to serve a multicultural city must go on. And it will go on. You have my word for that.
Fine words, but has anything really changed for black victims of crime? In the months following the publication of the Macpherson report, a new case emerged in Telford, near Birmingham, a town that is overwhelmingly white. For 2 years, 42-year-old Errol McGowan had been complaining to the police that he was being racially abused.
And when Errol came to the phone, they said, "You're a dead nigger."
As they walked past, they would say, "You're a dead nigger."
I mean, it got to the stage where they was writing on the wall, "Errol, you're a nigger."
Errol made numerous complaints to the police, but they seemed to fall on deaf ears. His partner of 15 years and mother of his 2 children remembers how disturbing the harassment was.
He was scared stiff. He had me up for 6 weeks crying in the night. And he got to the stage and he said, Sharon, he said, it's like a time bomb. He said, waiting to go off. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, I don't know when it's going to happen. He said, but I know I'm going to get murdered.
On the 2nd of July last year, Errol didn't turn up at work. His sister Doreen helped the police search.
So I pushed past the police and went straight into the house. And as I went in, Errol was slumped against the door. So I went straight over. I just thought he was asleep and shaking him to wake him up. When I shook him and I saw his head go to the side and I saw the flecks, I was just literally sick. And I ran outside, because I was just sick.
Errol was found dead, hanging from an inside doorknob with the cord of an electric iron round his neck. The police at the scene concluded that no further investigation was necessary, as Errol had committed suicide.
I know he never. And to me, the police, they know, but they doesn't cares. That's what I think. They don't care.
The West Mercia police should have been aware of an important result of the Macpherson report, the agreed definition of a racist incident. Quote, any incident which is perceived to be racist by the victim or any other person. Errol's death could have come under this new definition, in which case it should have been investigated as a racist incident, but the police didn't even carry out the proper forensic tests on his body.
We met with the police on the same day and asked them, don't they think with all the harassment Errol was having, should not they have done forensic and everything that they know, and they still, you know, they just went down the one way. We said, because the family asking so much, should they even do forensic for the family's peace of mind? And they said, you know, no.
The police respond in a press statement, quote, West Mercia Constabulary recognised immediately that the death of Errol McGowan was a serious incident, and extensive resources were employed from the outset. Unsatisfied with the police response to his uncle's mysterious death, Errol's 20-year-old nephew Jason decided to start an investigation himself, as his new wife Sinead describes.
He asked about people whose names Errol had mentioned to do with the threats. He'd gone around and found out about where they drank and what kind of people they were, whether or not they were that serious that they could kill somebody.
6 months later, Jason took time out to celebrate the new millennium with his wife and friends in a local pub. Just before midnight, he popped out for some air, saying he would be back in 5 minutes. Early in the morning, Jason's body was found hanging from railings a short distance from the pub.
I felt like the whole world collapsed with me. And I'm telling you, I begin to thump the table. And I run out the kitchen and I take up the phone. I turned it, I couldn't tell you how I felt. I couldn't believe it.
The family assumed that the police would see the sinister link between the two deaths and the history of racial harassment.
They've gone there, looked at the scene without taking anything else into consideration and thought, oh, there's a lad hanging off a railing. He's hung himself, and that's all they've thought. He had no reason. That night he'd blatantly said to his friends, I'm 100% happy with my life. I'm not making any New Year's resolutions this year. I've got everything I want. He was happy with his family, he loved his mum dearly, and he wouldn't put his mum through that again.
The strangest thing is, he was found hanged the same way Errol was, within 6 months. It just doesn't add up. It just doesn't add up. It's very suspicious.
The West Mercia Police argue in a press statement that they've done everything they can. Quote, our exhaustive inquiries have not revealed any evidence to suggest direct involvement of a third party in either death. But they've now agreed to hold a second investigation looking into possible links between the two deaths.
They said they was going to do this second investigation, thorough, but we all think they can't be trusted. I mean, it's happened once, we got nowhere, so what's going to be so different the second time?
So is the McGowan case a one-off aberration, or does it indicate that the police have not improved in the 12 months since Macpherson? Detective Inspector John Grieve, head of the Race and Violent Crimes Task Force.
I'm not going to talk about individual cases, but I suppose for every case like that I could find you lots of cases where we had managed to answer people's problems.
I don't think we can judge the broad-based change that's being undertaken now by individual cases. What we can do is say that the government, and not just the government, I think British society as a whole, is committed to making change.
I would be foolish to say that it was a perfect picture. We've got 1,700 years of black people in this country, and a long history of racism for us to deal with. So I would never pretend it was perfect. I just think the world looks very different to me to the way it looked 12 months ago.
The world looks very different to the McGowan family as well. Two of their family lie side by side in the local graveyard, the earth still piled high over Jason's coffin.
Well, I tell you, it affected me everlasting because I can't bring them back, but I'm fighting for justice, and that's what I want, justice.
We want justice, and that's a basic right. We are not asking them for any favors.
With these tears that fall, dear Ricky, each task becomes a weight. What had you done in your life so brief to have been given such a fate? With these tears that fall, dear Ricky, I promise you with each one, As long as I have life, I will get justice for you, my dear son.
The killers of Stephen Lawrence are at large. Ricky's killers are at large. There are other families whose loved ones have died. The killers are at large simply because here the police think black life is cheap.